Yeah, there's another dish with that. You can see it different but that one actually tastes which side. And I think that's so they did set aside now they're all picking up.
What are you fixing?
This is salted pork, which is it's basically been soaked in a salt brine, which is how they're generally preserving meat, especially in the military throughout this period. So it's just literally salted pork dumped into a barrel full of salt brine, and that's how it's preserved. And then we're going to twice boil it to get most of the salt content back out of the meat, and just make sure that it's sterile and edible. And we'll see how it tastes.
You ever heard that nickname? Trash Panda? What's a trash panda? You ever heard of it? You know what a raccoon is? Raccoon. You seen a raccoon? Sometimes people call them trash pandas. But anyway, so when the English got here, they'd never seen a raccoon before. So they asked their Powhatan friends, hey guys, what do you call those critters over there? And they said, well, we call them aracoon. You can tell over time that they kind of shortened up to raccoon, but nevertheless, yeah, that's where we got a lot of names. So when the English get here, they also, you know, they're asking about these things. They're like, hey guys, what is this? And they're like, whoa, tomahawk, right? Is that something? So I think maybe the earliest tomahawks could have been made using an antler, a deer antler, instead of what we think of today when we think about a tomahawk. We typically think of this, don't we? Yeah, we think about an axe with an iron blade on it, right? Yeah, but when the English got here, they didn't even have that word tomahawk. But they picked it up from the Powhatans. So you can see all the cool stuff the Powhatans would have brought over here. And so we're kind of tracing our history back to the year 1607. And you might know that that's the year the English first arrived, of course, in colonial Virginia. And they arrived in that place called Jamestown. But what people may not know. Yeah, you been to Jamestown, buddy? Yeah. You too? You been there? Okay, guys. Well, anyway, so after they got to Jamestown, of course, they weren't content to just sit in Jamestown. So after a couple of weeks of getting settled in, they loaded up a ship called a shallop. So it was a smaller ship than the ones they would have sailed over from England. And they sailed that up the James River. So if you look out here, you can see that's the James River. That's the James River from 400 years ago. Right? Where the boats came. Yeah. Now the river's changed course. It goes through Dutch Gap, but it used to go all the way around us. Oh yeah. So if you look out here, you can see where the river was 400 years ago. And there was an expedition that was launched up the James River in 1607 under the command of Christopher Newport. You might recall, if you've been to Jamestown, you see the 3 ships that they sailed into Jamestown back in those days. One of the ships is the Susan Constance, and of course Newport was the captain of the flagship. Anyway, he brought a group up here, and John Smith was one of that group, and they were known as the Corps of Discovery. So they write about encountering various native groups. Of course, we talk today about the Powhatans, but what we may not realize is the Powhatan Indians is actually a collective of about 30 plus individual tribes. So if you've heard the name, the Pamunkeys, and the Chickahominies, and the Mattapanai, and the Nansemans, and others, those are all Powhatans. So when they get to this particular area in the river, they're going to encounter a group of folks that we now remember as the Arahatic Indians. And they write about trading with the Arahatic and receiving things from them. So what's one of the things they received? Well, they received a bounty of venison. And do we know what venison is? What's venison, guys?
Deer.
Deer meat, exactly, you got it. So what do we have? What do we have roasting over the fire right now?
Deer meat.
Exactly, that's right. We got a nice venison loin cooking right now. Indeed. So there it is, doing a little roasting of a venison loin. So we'll let that cook over the fire over a little bit of a low heat. Lots of smoke, give it some flavor. And you think about this, when the natives
when the Arahatuk and other Powhatan Indians would hunt, did they have a refrigerator to stick all the meat that they had left over from the initial feeding that they might have had? Yeah, they didn't have a refrigerator. So how do you guys think they preserve their meat?
Smoke it.
Smoke it, exactly. And that's why we have this outdoor kitchen set up, okay? So there were Englishmen who arrived here in the coast back in, actually as early as the 1580s. And one of them, a fellow by the name of John White, was an artist. And he sketches the houses they lived in, what we call Yehakans. That's the Algonquian or Powhatan word for the houses they lived in. He sketched the outdoor kitchens, so that's where we base our outdoor kitchen off of, is those original sketches. He sketches these what look like totems. They were in circular fashion, and he actually sketched the natives dancing around these totems. So that was part of their daily ritual. And then others will write, boy, they dance pretty much every single day, so it was very important for them. It was a part of their religion. Okay. Yeah, so in case you guys don't know, or you're just catching up on things, my name's DJ. I'm one of the interpreters here, and I'm representing one of the members of the Corps of Discovery, a group of men that would have sailed up the James River in 1607, a couple of weeks after the original 3 ships arrived in Jamestown. And there were such notables on board that ship as John Smith. You guys seen the Disney version of Pocahontas? Yeah, and you learn about the legend, about Pocahontas and how she probably saved John Smith and all that business. Well, John Smith is one of those individuals that would have sailed up here and would have been interacting with the Arahatuk Indians that lived in this area. And they were remarkable and written about by the English because they were very friendly at that time. So, of course, the English are going to be trading with them. And what are they going to be trading for?
Food.
Exactly. They're going to be hungry, and they're actually going to come here with the intention of, like, we don't need to bring all kinds of food because we're just going to trade with the Native Americans when we get here. So that's what they do. And actually, they're really surprised at how much food that they have. So one thing we want to emphasize and we'd like to talk about in terms of the Powhatans is this. The Powhatans, when the English arrive, are very well established and have a very high level of agriculture going on. So in the summer months over here, we have an agricultural plot where we grow the 3 sisters. Have you guys ever heard of the 3 sisters? You haven't studied that yet? Okay, so the Indians were growing corn, beans, and squash together. First they would plant corn and a stalk. You guys seen corn growing? You've seen corn stalks growing in a field?
Yes.
Yeah, and then the corn grows up, and then what they do is after a couple of weeks when the corn's starting to sprout, then they'll plant a few beans at the base. And the beans start to sprout, and what they do is they'll actually attach to the stalk of the corn, and they'll start to spiral up. So the corn stalk serves as a stake to support the beans that are runners, which means they grow up spiraling up something. And then finally, a couple of weeks later, they'll grow squash. They'll plant some squash seeds. And what happens is they actually kind of planted all this into a mound of dirt, of earth. And what happens is the squash starts to grow and leaves start to blossom out. And these squash leaves are quite broad. And what they do is they cover that base and they keep the base from drying out. So it's really ingenious method of agriculture. So they grew them together. So we call those, because they work in harmony, they were all like buddies working together, they call them the 3 sisters. They're sister friends.
Weeds as well, with the leaves, the squash leaves covering everything else, so there are a lot of weeds covered.
Yeah, exactly. That too. That would also hamper, the growing of weeds as well. It's pretty amazing, isn't it? So one of the things that we find out, just based on the records that we're accessing, we read a lot of cool books about all this history, guys. And what it tells us is that the Arahatuk, amongst all of these other Powhatans, were growing so much corn that they had plenty of corn to trade with the English. So they were really, really awesome farmers, indeed. But you can see all the amazing things that they would have brought. So can you guys tell which side is the Native American side, the things they might have brought to trade to the English? And can you tell which side is the English side? Yeah.
Which side do you think, Jen?
Yeah, what do you guys think? These guys figured it out. What's that?
So the one with the pumpkins is what they brought to that side.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's going to be the right-hand side. Yeah, those are all the things that the natives would have brought. You can see a lot of it centers around deer, right? So deer, definitely one of the most important things they hunted. And one of the things I don't have any bits and pieces of right now, but they would have hunted as well, maybe not in this immediate area, but sometimes, but would have been black bear. So they were hunting bear as well. Yeah. And if we go back a few thousand years, they would have been hunting elk, caribou, moose, even bison. And a few thousand years before that, they would have hunted woolly mammoth around here. So it's kind of amazing, actually. Yeah, there it is, guys. So you can imagine the Powhatans would have used one of these to hunt with. You guys know what this is?
Bow and arrow.
Yeah, exactly, a bow and arrow, that's right. Yep, they would have used a bow and they would have shot their arrows to harvest turkey, deer, all kinds of good critters that would have been awesome for eating, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you can see, that's their arrows. We lost the point on that one. Yeah. Do you know where we get these feathers from? They go on the end of our arrows.
A bird?
Yeah. What kind of bird do you think? Turkey. Yeah, absolutely. A turkey, a wild turkey. Yep, for sure. Yeah. So they would have used their bows for hunting. And then how about the English? When the English arrive, they're going to be looking around at everything, and they're going to show the Powhatans something that they've got. Get this to stay. There you go. Stay. Awesome. And then the English would have arrived, and they would have had these guys. What's this?
A shotgun.
It's a what?
The shotgun.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, absolutely. It could be used like a shotgun for sure. This is your matchlock musket. And yeah, so a shotgun is something that you put a bunch of little tiny pellets in here, and then when you shoot it, it's got like a pattern that could be used to maybe harvest a bird that is in flight, and that way you've got more than one chance to hit it because it's firing a bunch of little pellets. But this can also shoot a solid ball as well, and that's what you would use perhaps for harvesting a deer or a bear.
So that's a smooth bore then.
What's that?
That's a smooth bore.
Yeah, so this is, because it's a smooth bore, you can shoot shot and solid projectiles, round ball out of it. Indeed. So that's what the English would bring. So what do you think the Powhatans were doing when they saw this? What do you think they thought of this?
The game just got up.
Yeah, exactly. They were like, okay, well, let's see now, Mr. Englishman. We're really digging your tomahawks, and we think these mirrors are pretty nifty. Definitely. We're super excited about these fancy blue beads because boy, oh boy, the ladies love to wear these, don't they? Right? And we certainly like this. Because to the Powhatans, copper was a very, very precious commodity. They actually had copper. They were trading with natives all the way up into the Great Lakes where they actually worked copper, but it was very rare, it was very expensive in the grand scheme of things. And so when the English arrived, they'd actually been tipped off. They'd heard the Powhatans really fancied copper, so they loaded up on these copper pots and they showed up and they were like, here guys, and the Powhatans were like, holy cow, this is a fortune. So do you think they cooked in it? Nope, they sure didn't. What they did, they cut them up and they turned them into beads so they could be worn by people. Just like that. So those are little bits of copper that have been worked from a pot or something like that. Yeah, pretty amazing. Indeed. So yeah, but the thing they really thought was amazing were these. We look back at the records and we'll read about Chief Powhatan and the things that he wanted more than anything else. And this is the one thing they looked at and said, yeah, we kind of want those. And there were some issues with regards to that. Were they going to get guns? Well, at times they did. In fact, there were times where when the English get here and they actually start bringing in Powhatan Indians to help them hunt. So they actually issue out guns. Some of the special day of cooking for us here at Henricus, right? Yeah. So when they were doing their trading, of course, we kind of mentioned the English are really keyed in on like what's the one thing they really want. Boy, they really want food. It's going to be one of the most important things for them. So they're going to start learning about maize or corn. So that's the corn, beans, and squash we were talking about. So, and of course in the English cooking tradition, actually there's some similarities they both like to do. The English will call it a pottage, And the Powhatans, well, they had kind of like a soup that they would cook. So traditionally the natives, of course, were going to use earthen cooking vessels. Unfortunately, all my earthen pots is broken. So we need to get some new ones made, or we're going to have to make some new ones anyway. But in the meantime, you know, we've got one of these trade pots. Remember I told you they wouldn't cook in these? Well, the English looked at these and they were just a pot, right? You know, copper is pretty cool, but it's not that impressive to the English. They're more interested in things like gold and silver. But nevertheless, to them, the copper pot is going to be more of a utilitarian thing, whereas again, the Powhatans are going to look at it and say, I ain't cooking in that. I got dirt, I got earthenware vessels I can cook in. I'm going to take that and use it for something else, you know? Get some bling for my my family. But nevertheless, anyway, I'm cooking a pottage in here, or a kind of a stew or soup. And what's interesting is when you kind of look at, you know, how the English were going to start adapting to this new diet, this new place that they've arrived. So I'm cooking corn and beans, and instead of squash, what I'm using is a leek. So, and that's not going to be native around here, right? So that'd be kind of a little bit of a crossover dish. So part Powhatan and then part English as they were adapting to this new diet. So we're doing a little bit cooking there. And then of course we got a nice venison loin cooking right now.
So they also toss meat in the pottage, or?
Yes, actually they sure did. And that's another thing too. So, you know, today when it comes to meat, what do we like to do? We like to grill our meats, take on a great flavor, a great taste. The Powhatan Indians, on the other hand, like a lot of other cultures that you might encounter in different places, they actually would boil their meats. Yeah, so a lot of these pottages that the Powhatans were fashioning would have had cut up meat inside the soup or the broth.
Well,
yep.
The crock pot's definitely easier to work with.
Man, absolutely, grill, right? You got it for sure. Yep.
Otherwise, you gotta stand there.
I didn't want to waste this loin by boiling it today. So I worked real hard for this loin, guys. This is actually from a deer that I harvested. So yeah, so I'm taking a little more care, and I'm going to grill it. But nevertheless, here you go. So. Got a little venison going today. What's that, sir?
The English would have boiled just as much as the Powhatans because they're used to the English culture where they're short on lumber, which is part of the reason that he moved to America is harvesting lumber.
Yeah, absolutely. They burned all their trees, eh?
Jamestown.
Yeah, wonderful. Yep, sure enough, mate. Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah. The grilling tradition wasn't. Yeah, listen, guys, absolutely. So you're more than welcome.